regularly scheduled program in progress.
Good to start at the very first. I've been using the term the Travis County Juvenile Justice Center. Now, through Austin Metropolitan Ministries in years past, we always referred to the chaplaincy at Gardner House, but that's the same thing. It is the Travis County, Thomas, you're going to need to help me, the Travis County Gardner Betts
Juvenile Justice Center. that's the title of the new facility, which is located at 2515 South Congress.
Now, what is a juvenile justice center? What is in that facility out there?
Well, in the facility, we have different departments. We have the field probation department, we have the delinquency prevention unit, we have the intake division, and the detention facility itself.
The detention facility and the intake, so that if a youth were detained or brought in for some, accused of some activity, then they would be there and everything would happen there.
Exactly. Juvenile is brought into custody is the term we use, and it's put out by the Texas Family Code. When they're first brought out to the facility, they are detained based on 5 criteria that is set out by the Texas Family Code.
Now, let me back up. The Texas Family Code is kind of the rules and regulations for dealing with juveniles?
Juveniles, exactly, and more precisely the Title III of the Texas Family Code.
And the things that they might be brought in for. That's where you were, the 5 things.
Right. Well, not only brought in for, but can be detained under. Those being a child is likely to abscond from the jurisdiction in which they are, lack of supervision not being provided properly for them. The most important one and most serious is, of course, the seriousness of the crime, of the offense the child has committed. If they have a history of hurting themselves or someone else. And those are basically the ones that a child is detained under.
You're using the word child, and that just kind of strikes at my heart. Tell me what we're talking about when we're talking about a juvenile. What is the age we're talking about by the code?
The age ranges from 10 through 16. And
my goodness, that's thinking of children involved in law, and perhaps their whole life is affected. And Christine, I'm just awfully glad to know that there is a chaplain, that the religious community is at that place, that critical place in the youth, the lives of these youth. But back up a little bit and tell me, how long have you been in this chaplain role?
I have been chaplaining there for 2 years now, and it has been some of the most challenging work that I have been able to do. It has tapped into, I feel, some gifts that can be brought to ministry with that particular population. The staff is wonderful with them, but sometimes the kids have this honor code where they don't want to really talk to the staff. And a chaplain can go in there with this collar on, and they feel safe to say things to a chaplain that maybe this person is for them, whereas the staff person is just another authority figure.
Well, I could understand that. In the length of time that you have been there, how have you found you are able to deal with, in effect, troubled youth? And you're there, you're dealing with them at, maybe with family, maybe by themselves, maybe before judges, and then you have to leave that. You couldn't possibly carry all of that weight around. Have you found a way to kind of detach so that you can be professional, compassionate, supportive, but survive?
It's really important to detach. You put your finger on something that is real important to me. I'm a full-time student in addition to being a single parent, so I can't really afford to come home with those issues hanging over me. And there's another part of it too. I don't think that you really do the kids there, or the juveniles there, any favors if you take that home with you. There really needs to be a clinical edge. You really need to maintain an objectivity with them. That's very important.
Let me pose the same question to you, Tomas. How long have you been there?
I've been with the center for 8 years now,
Well,
straight out of college.
you must have learned also some way to be a professional when you are there, but somehow close the door and not live with that 24 hours a day. Have you had to work on that?
Yes, I have, especially with my background coming from South Texas, being a close family, and then coming into this type of environment has always been hard. The compassion part, like Chris was saying, is sometimes very difficult to do with some of the juveniles that come through the system. Our philosophy there is the 3 F's, what we call being fair, firm, and friendly with the juvenile. We have to make them understand that some of the things they've done are wrong, but yet we've got to show them that compassion that they are lacking possibly at home.
When the length of time that you have been there, I'm sure that it takes some special training to be in a staff situation that deals with juveniles like that. What are some of the requirements to be in a staff position?
To become a juvenile probation officer, of course, you need the 4-year degree from a university. Aside from that, it's 1 year of direct child care experience, plus 80 hours of training that's provided through the center.
So I'm sure that you learn an awful lot as you deal with the youth. And Christine, I wanted to go back to something you said about a full-time student. That's at
The Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. I'm in my senior year now.
But did you come to this juvenile justice system just cold, or did you have some awareness of the legal system, or what is your background?
My background is in law enforcement. I was a police officer, and I also worked as a crisis counselor at the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department. And I've always been interested in juveniles.
Well, I'm awfully glad you're there, and I'm glad that you're there too. So if a youth were brought in, that if he or she was admitted, then whatever proceedings would take place there, and also if the case were disposed of by saying, you're to stay here for a while. What is that called? What is the language for that?
Well, the proceedings, like you said, are divided into 3 sections. The first one being the detention hearing. The second one...
Would that be what I would call a trial? Is that where they hear the facts, or...?
No, when they hear the facts, it's called the adjudication hearing. And that's where the child goes into court together with the defense attorney, and they decide whether or not the child is guilty of committing the crime. After that is the disposition hearing, where the case is actually disposed. And by it being disposed, it can go to several areas. The child can be placed on probation at home, can be placed on probation away from home, at a foster care facility, at a placement that the county has contracts with, or the ultimate being the Texas Youth Commission, the child being committed to the Texas Youth Commission.
So some might stay there. That might be at the Juvenile Justice Center.
Temporarily. They'll stay there temporarily until something happens to the case.
And so what are we talking about as far as numbers? The youth that might be there at any given time. The facilities will hold what?
It has the capability of holding 47 juveniles, with an additional 16 beds that are to be added in the future. We also have a shelter that hasn't opened yet, but will be in the near future here, I think in March, and that will serve for juveniles that are involved in truancy, runaways, minor offenses that are considered minor offenses in the terms of the juvenile justice system. And aside from the 47 beds, we have 5 additional holding rooms where a child can stay pending the release to the parent.
Now, if they are there for any length of time, What sort of commitment does the center have to make to their well-being? Certainly, they have to give them a place to sleep and meals, but is part of your work, and then I want to ask you, Chris, are there activities planned? Do they have to go to school?
Yes, ma'am. Aside from the juvenile probation officers, we have 2 teachers that are hired through the Austin Independent School District, and they come in and do whole class for the juveniles every day from Monday through Friday for approximately 5 hours. And aside from the class itself, we have activities that are handled through the juvenile probation officers in the detention center.
Now, Christine, I wanted to ask you some fairly in-depth things about volunteers, the kinds of ways that people might help. He's talked about a teacher, and at what points, well, let me back up and ask you, what are the things that you try to accomplish because your time is so limited?
If I look at it in terms of a job description, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me. What I try and accomplish and what I'm actually doing sometimes are
maybe a gap there.
Are different.
Well, I was wondering, do you try to be there when there are hearings?
Yes. There are detention hearings fairly regularly, and a lot of times the kids can't have their parents be there, or sometimes parents aren't there. And so they feel scared and alone, and they'll ask me to attend. Other times, parents will be outside of the area where the detention hearings are, waiting for the judge to come into the courtroom, and it's a time of real tension. They're upset, they're nervous, and they need someone to reach out to them and let them know that somebody cares. And giving a little positive feedback to them about something positive their child did while they were in detention can really help them go into that not feeling quite as upset.
As a representing the Christian community, do you try to have worship services?
Worship services are every Sunday, and I do that on Sunday afternoon. And I have a contemporary service and like to use music because they respond so well to contemporary music.
I'm sure it has to be totally voluntary. And
Exactly.
So do they come to the service?
They certainly come. I have attendance averaging around 15 to 20 on a pretty regular basis.
You conduct that. You have contemporary music. And so you are able to help them know that not only the church or the religion is there in a hearing, but also in a worshiping setting also.
In a worship setting, and I think part of the message I really want to communicate to them is that God's love for them is unconditional, and that even though forgiveness isn't, how do I say this? I don't want them to get the impression that they don't have to be responsible for what they've done, but I want to communicate to them that God forgives them no matter what they have done.
Well, just thinking about some of the youth, you said 10 to 16 was what was called a juvenile.
A juvenile.
And some may not have any family that can either visit or be with them at those times, and seems to me that the people that they encounter at the Juvenile Justice Center are very, very important. I want to talk a little bit about volunteers or someone who may want to get involved in the program. Now, do you encourage volunteers of any kind?
I definitely do, yes. Right now, with the help of Chris, we're getting some volunteers to come in and do sports activities with the juveniles during the weekend. During the weekend, we don't have school, of course, and that's the time the kids have more time to think about what's going on in their life and why they're there. So with the help of some volunteers, we can kind of keep them away from that and get them more involved in activities, make, you know, our day easier as well as their stay there.
So if someone could work with small groups and maybe athletics and could spend a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon?
Exactly.
How would they go about doing that? Would they just call the Gardner House?
They would.
The
Gardner
Juvenile
Bench.
Justice Center?
They could call, and we have a volunteer coordinator, Mark Lovelace. And Mark, once a month, has orientation for volunteers, and we would plug them into an orientation. They would see the facility, and there would be some paperwork that they would need because it is a secure facility. We would have to...
Let me stop you just a minute to say, what does that mean, a secure facility? Just locking it up, or are bars on the windows?
It's a jail.
It's a detention
It's a
center.
detention
They're
facility.
detained, so
Temporary detention facility is basically what it is. And by secure, we mean that the juveniles can't come and go when they want. When they were brought in there, they stay there for a length of time until their case is disposed of. The facility itself has an outside activities area and a recreation yard which is surrounded by a 12-foot fence. That's the most secure the facility in Travis County has been since I've been there, and at least for the past 30 years. The old facility that was there had no fence around it.
I remember that.
Right.
Looking at it from Congress Avenue, it just looked like an office building,
Exactly.
kind of. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the problems was, you know, kids escaping, you know, through whatever measures. And, of course, that is now stopped by the fence that is surrounding the facility itself.
Well, now, Christine, I was asking that so that if a person was interested in volunteering, they would have a little bit of an idea that they really are going to have to take pretty seriously. There's going to be some orientation, and they just can't waltz in at any time. Name some of the needs that you have for volunteers. With the worship services during weekdays, what?
During the worship services, if someone, for instance, would be talented musically and would be willing to come in, play the guitar, that kind of thing, I would be very happy to have that. Other needs in terms of volunteers, the teachers would love to have one-on-one tutoring.
The teachers being the AISD teachers that are there. And there's a need for tutors.
There's a need for tutors. A lot of times when you have, well, if you have 30 children there, it's very difficult to give those individuals attention with their assignments. And to have some people who could work with them one-on-one would help build their self-esteem.
And if a person were interested in doing that, do you think the best time for them to do that would be in the daytime or the evening? I'm trying to think if a volunteer was hearing that, they might say, well, I could go in the evening, but I couldn't go in the morning or something like that. There's a need anytime?
Actually, any time would be welcomed, yes. We're not gonna deny anybody, you know, unless there's some underlying circumstances like Chris was saying. One thing that we do have to stress is that all the proceedings with the juvenile justice system are confidential, and whatever goes on in there basically stays there. They are protected under the law, of course, because they are juveniles. So, you know, the volunteers would have to go go through a screening and a background check through the Department of Public Safety and that type of deal.
Sure, I think it's fair they know that there's, there probably are some people that are more appropriate being a volunteer at the library or Zilker Park or something instead of working with kiddos. And so it's fair that they know there's going to have to be some screening. But there is a need, and it seems to me that it would just make triplets out of you all if there were some people that could do that kind of thing. I was also, could we talk a little bit about the things that kids do that get them there? What are the, I don't want to say crimes, what is the language that I'm wanting to use? The things, how they break the law or accused
Offenses they commit,
offenses,
actually.
okay.
What the terminology is. And, well, some of those, it can be actually anything from murder to runaways. That's a wide spectrum of them.
Wow.
But we had some kids that have been referred for murder. Lately, the numbers are highest in auto thefts. So it's a wide spectrum, actually, of what kind of offenses they're referred for.
About 70%, if you're looking for a statistic, about 70% of the crimes or the offenses are theft related in some way that bring them there.
Oh, can you walk that backwards? What might be some of the reasons for that? I thought maybe theft in order to sell things quickly for drugs. How are this age youth and drugs? Do you have any view about that? Is that involved?
Yes, there is some involvement in drugs. We have juveniles that have been referred for possession of cocaine, crack, for the use of cocaine, crack. For a while there, we had a lot of juveniles that were being referred for the use of whiteout, the sniffing of whiteout.
Are you saying whiteout, the stuff you put over my typing mistakes?
Exactly, exactly.
And that's a chemical that...
There have
They
been
sniff,
deaths from that.
and there have been deaths that have stemmed from that. In terms of burglaries, again, you know, it stems from auto, like Chris was saying, auto thefts to burglaries from a home. We have had some gang involvement, gang activity that has stemmed from all this also.
In the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, I have read some about the emergence of gangs in Austin. What is your perspective on that? Is that a constant, or does that kind of come and go?
I don't know if I can speak to if it's a constant. I feel one important dynamic to understand is that the gang replaces the family, and a lot of times the gang becomes very, very important because of what is lacking in terms of family structure in their life.
That is just devastating, isn't it?
Personally, I personally have seen a rise in gang involvement. You know, being there 8 years, I think it's a serious problem in Austin, you know, something that we need to address, and we can't just kind of shove off the back door. It used to be that kids denied being involved in gang activities. Now they very openly say, yes, I'm involved with a certain gang, and they kind of show some pride in that, you know, so it is a problem.
And there were different tattoos. A lot of times the kinds of tattoos that they have on them will identify them as different gang members.
So it is family in the sense of a place to belong, a place to be nurtured, a place to get some self-esteem. Acceptance. And is it power, or do they go out in the streets and the things that they do, is it related to wanting to be in control, or?
Actually, it goes back to just having something to do, you know.
An activity.
An activity, exactly. A lot of these juveniles are just out there trying to keep themselves occupied. You asked, you know, what stems the involvement in the criminal justice and the juvenile justice system.
What brings them in,
A lot of the times is the family not being there, you know, lack of activities with the family. Parents many times have to hold 2 jobs. Parents don't have a job, therefore the juveniles themselves go out and try and do something for the family, and in essence get involved with criminal activities.
Well, you are really making a heartbreaking point about the role of the family, the vital importance, and some of the things that happen if that safety net and that nurturing is not there for these really children. They are children under 16 years old. And it is reassuring to me to know that there are caring individuals like you, Tomas, there, and Christine, you are representing the church community, and I'm so proud of you for being there and doing that. Just a word about your future. You are a graduating seminarian.
I'm graduating in May, and I could either go into a church or go into a prison kind of ministry, and that's still indefinite.
Well, I salute you both. It's admirable work that you do, and on behalf of the whole community, we are so pleased to have visited with Thomas Medina and Christine Ionicelli about the work at the Gardner Betts Juvenile Justice Center and their caring, tough, compassionate work with 10 to 16-year-old juveniles there. We hope that you have learned more about this and that you might pick up the phone, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries, and volunteer. You're welcome to join us again next week, same time and same place for Austin Faith Dialogue. Good day.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.